The only thing that we do at the Research Foundation is we raise money and we deploy it for research. And in the last 5 years, we've raised millions of dollars and we've funded 20 projects. Those 20 projects now have 5 clinical candidates. So we are taking the CMT arena by storm. We are bringing in new companies. We are bringing in new people. Many of them are in the room today. There are some companies in this room that hadn't heard of CMT before the CMT Research Foundation put ourselves in front of them. And that's why we're here, because we are tired of not having treatments and we are going to work relentlessly. But one thing that's really important to know is we can't do the work without you. You guys are part of the community. You're part of the support. Your financial support is amazing. Thank you. Your volunteer support is amazing. Thank you. Many volunteers put today together. So thank you to them. Thank you for being here, for showing up, for being willing to be part of the solution rather than sitting in the sidelines and just hoping and waiting and thinking that somebody else is going to get it done. You're here today because you want to be a part of that solution too.
You know, having the right side, let's put it this way. Yesterday was a packed day of scientists, and I call them heroes. You know, the scientists are our heroes trying to find a solution. The companies that have sat in the room are our heroes that are trying to find a solution. And quite frankly, anyone in this room who's taken the time to come and take action is my hero as well. You know, from the standpoint of there's no boogeyman in the room. We're all trying to find the treatment, the secret elixir, if you will. Having the right scientists and the right team and the SAB is part of the solution. You know, I just want to let you know that being transparent, and you can look on our website and see all our SAB members, you can see our board members, you can see the projects that we have funded with the names of the companies from that standpoint. The SAB is tasked with finding the best technology, the best projects with a single goal of getting something into our systems as fast as possible. There's a twist of what we do though. We don't put something out there and saying, here's what we're looking for and wait for something to come. We're proactive. We go after the companies. We go after, we do the reading, we do our homework, we set the table, and we seek that out. Sure, we've got a lot of people coming to us, but our strategy has teeth to it. And so, you know, there's a lot of thought process put into it from that standpoint. Once you know the problems, I'm an engineer, never used my degree, but if you can identify a cause to a problem, you put the right people in and the right experts, and you put the right capital and spend it wisely to the problem, you're going to get a solution.
And every one of our projects we look at through 3 different lenses, which I think is one of the reasons why we've had such great success. One, we look at it to make sure that it's scientifically relevant. Does it have the basic science that we need? Does it have the foundational science to help us understand the disease? Then we talk to the clinicians and we say, whatever we're going to do with this science, is the outcome going to be clinically meaningful? Does it matter, the outcome matter to us as patients? But then the last thing that we do with our scientific advisory board is we take a look at it through a commercial lens, because we can't fund the development of drugs by ourselves. It costs hundreds of millions of dollars. But what we can do is we can be the ones to start the project that then a commercial entity is going to want to take over to invest the hundreds of millions of dollars for the clinical trials. And the best example we have of that is DTX Pharma.
Yeah, DTX is obviously an inflection point for all of us, and I'm sure everyone in the room has seen the announcement. DTX is a company that was focused on retinoid pigmentosa, an eye disease. Susan and our team, Paul, scouted them out, read up on their technology, which is called Falcon, and said, you know what? They should try it on CMT1A. We attend the bio conference every year. Susan and Paul set up a speed dating. And lo and behold, we talked them into doing a project for CMT1A. that can knock down the expression of PMP22. So you're talking about a company 3 years ago didn't know what CMT was, already didn't do any work in PNS or peripheral nervous system. And 3.5 years later, we've got one of the biggest pharma companies now taking the mantle and getting that drug hopefully across the goal line in short order. That's proof positive that how we approach our business here of finding a treatment works. Not only that, I can tell you that we've now, is it 20 projects, right?
We're at
Is
20
it 20?
projects?
We're at 20 projects. And from the standpoint of those projects, they all address the barriers that the SAB and our resources have located or recognized, and we've gone after that. 8 of the 9 companies that were in the room yesterday, or 8 of the 9 companies that have come to CMT in the last 3 years, we funded. Another proof positive of what our method to our madness is working in a big way. So, from that standpoint, when you scout out the projects, you address the barriers, you hold true to what you're trying to do and not, be distracted by noise in the atmosphere or anything else that might come our way. That single focus leads to, and strategy leads to a development of a drug.
Yeah, so just a real quick review. We gave DTX $125,000. 6 months later, they had enough data to earn an NIH grant for $350,000. 6 months later, they had enough data to earn $100 million in investments. And a couple years later, they were bought by Novartis for $1 billion for their CMT1A program. So that's the kind of action that our scientific strategy can lead to. And we like being those catalysts. We like funding the unfundable. But we can't stop with one DTX. A, not everybody in the room has CMT1A. But B, even if you do, we need options. Because not every person in this room is going to want to take or be eligible to take a gene therapy. So we need small molecules, we need options, we need to preserve our axons, we need to stop the root cause. And I just want you to know you have our commitment. We are going to be relentless about finding those partners, new partners who'd never heard of CMT, current partners who are working in it. Our job is to fund the unfundable, to be catalytic in that movement, and then to initiate, or what's the word I'm looking for, like instigate all the other external funding. That's what we do. So you as a donor, as an investor, can know that we're turning $125,000 into $1 billion. That's what we do. And we'll continue to do that until we have treatments and cures for every type.
Look, the idea is to have as many shots on goal. We've got DTX, we've got Armatus. There's another announcement that'll be made later this week on one of our first projects that we invested in on a company that is doing extremely well, as you know. We're also agnostic as to where that first victory comes. I know we think it's 1A, but like cystic fibrosis, their first one that they solved was for 2% of cystic fibrosis patients. So that's why we're looking at any project for any number, any letter attached to it. I'm axonal type, undiagnosed, unverified. If Stefan Zuckner's in here, hold his feet to the fire that maybe he can one day get to that bottom line. But bottom line is that we want 20, 40, 50, 100 DTXs focused on that. So we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. We got a lot of work to do with 1A. We're excited about what we've started together, and you are all part of it. I think it was Ray Kinsella in the Field of Dreams saying, if you build it, he will come. Well, y'all are coming. Y'all are coming because you want the same thing that we want. And it takes all of our community to be involved in a big, big way. So, Susan, I'm so proud to see this, and to the people out on the hinterlands or on Zoom. get involved, take action, and help Susan and our dream come true. Let's get one victory on the board, because I'm telling you, that'll change the world for all the other types and numbers.
That's it. Thank you, y'all.
Thank you, Pat and Susan. There are no shrinking violets here, so come join the team. And so you've heard quite a bit about DTX Pharma. We do talk about it a lot because we're so excited about their success, which is our success collectively. And it really demonstrated our early drive to bring new players into the CMT research field, new investors, new scientists, new researchers. I'm not going to tell you any more because I think you've heard the details, but what I would like to do is introduce you to Dr. Artie Suckow, who is a scientist and was the founder of DTX Pharma. Artie wanted to be here today, and I think he will tell you why he's not. He's joining us by video, and he's going to tell you the DTX Pharma story from his perspective for a minute.
Thanks, Cleary, for having me today. Apologies that I couldn't be there for Patient Day in person. I promised my son this year that I would come home and be in person for his birthday. But I did want to participate in Patient Day, given all that patients have given to me and inspired me to develop drugs for CMT patients.
Well, you're a good dad, Artie, and we're glad to have you any which way we possibly can. So thanks for coming. Can you tell us for a minute about the origin of your relationship with CMT?
Yeah, Cleary, and I think I've told this story 100 times, but I know there's a lot of new folks in the audience, and so the relationship, between the company I founded, DTX, and CMTRF began by outreach of Susan and Paul August to someone who was helping me or supporting me with business development at the time, Ani Ganel. And that was at Bio in in Philadelphia in 2019. And that meeting, which I actually missed, we joke amongst the friends and family that I ghosted CMTRF, but I was just actually in the wrong meeting room. But the short version of the meeting is that Paul and Susan presented us with some literature on CMT1A. The company DTX was looking for an indication that was a good fit for the technology, and that day we actually started designing molecules, and we're off to the races, so to speak. That led to some initial seed funding from the CMTRF. That further catapulted the idea and allowed us to get some proof of concept that we could actually deliver to the cells that are driving the CMT1A condition, the Schwann cells. And then from there, NIH grant funding, a Series B led by RA Capital, that was really meant, the proceeds of which were largely devoted to developing a drug for CMT1A. And as you probably all recently heard, in July, Novartis was so excited about the CMT1A program that they acquired not only CMT1A, but the technology in a transaction that completed just a few weeks ago.
So now the company has been acquired and the development continues. But what inspires you to keep working on CMT?
Yeah, I think, for me, that 2019 not only was the start of science, but it was the start of developing relationships with a host of patients and champions of CMT research. And so some of those, folks that I think about, like Stella, Carter, Pat, Joe, Susan, all of their stories, are why I'm here today, why we so passionately spent the last 3 or 4 years, staying up at nights trying to solve the problem of CMT. And so, when I don't work for DTX anymore, I don't work for Novartis anymore, but I stood in front of you guys on a number of occasions and said, I'm not going to stop until we have a drug for this disease. And, it comes back to those meetings with the patients. And as you know, we had patients at our Christmas party, we had patient days at DTX, we had all those Zoom meetings where I got to meet, Stella and Carter. And so, the honest truth is that's what has me excited to, not only bring or, from the sidelines cheer on DTX, but to make sure that we're bringing more and more drugs to the clinical research stage.
What are you excited about over the next 5 years in CMT research?
So there's a lot to be excited about. I think we're just at the cutting edge of therapeutics for the various CMTs. So as you know, I eat, slept, and breathe RNA therapeutics. And so I'm obviously excited about RNA therapeutics and the approach that Novartis, formerly GTX, is taking to address the underlying genetic lesion driving CMT1A. And what excites me most about that is we'll really, hopefully, learn a lot through the clinical development of that program, what endpoints, what patients respond to, and we can leverage that knowledge to run better clinical trials for some of the other up and coming approaches, but also to align with the FDA on what are the endpoints. The other thing that really excites me is that I think over the next 5 years, 10 years, the technology is really going to start to match up with the underlying genetics driving some of the other CMTs. So whether it's gene therapies, whether it's gene editing approaches, whether it's just understanding some of the targets that are driving the CMTs, I'm really excited, to work with the CMTRF, the NIH, et cetera, to try to champion some of those, through preclinical development and into the clinic. And then lastly, what has me excited, and I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but the recent news of an Actio financing for 2C. I've also seen several non-confidential decks of companies going after other CMTs. So the work that you all are doing is apparently starting to bear fruit in lots of interest in people moving into the space. And so I'm really excited to see some of that come to the different finish lines associated with preclinical and clinical development.
Thank you, Artie. And we are very excited and like to think that some of our work had something to do with it, but certainly it's your work that did. So here we are. I want to just go look back for a moment and just talk about what compelled you to deepen the relationship with Novartis and ultimately sell the company to them. Why is that a good thing for you, for patients, for the community?
Yeah, I think probably I have 2 or 3 things to say on that. One, patience is a critical word, both, that we want to help and really bring treatments that reverse the disease to patients, but patience, meaning that it takes a long time to develop a drug. And Novartis is a company that their neuroscience department is led by a guy by the name of Robert Bailu. Many of you may have heard of him because he's been in CMT research for more than a decade. When I spoke with him, almost on a daily basis during the consummation of this deal, he was as excited as I was, or maybe as more passionate than even I am, if that's possible. And so that had me excited. And, the resources that are required to run a clinical program, they had all the infrastructure in place, and they have a track record of sort of taking the baton from another company in another neuromuscular disease and bringing it over the finish line. And coming back to patients, CMT1A is a difficult disease to do clinical development in because, you have to get the modulation of PMP22 right. And so that may require, it may not be the first dose you go into the clinic with. It may take 5 doses, it may take 6 doses. And Novartis can have the patients, has the resources to take what's going to be a really challenging development program, through key inflection points. And so, and that otherwise would have required, maybe $500 million to see through. And so, Bob Bailu, Novartis resources, and a track record of success in neuromuscular disease. So
my last question is, what are you going to do next? Do you know?
With respect to my relationship with CMTRF, I'm not going anywhere. I fully plan to continue to be involved, on the scientific front, on helping to get companies engaged and going in CMT research. And, I will be around with you guys until we have an approved drug, or until I retire, which isn't until we have an approved drug. So I think I know that much. And I would say on what's next, on the more day-to-day part of my role, I am a scientist at heart. And so, whether I start a company, I want to get involved in early stage companies, obviously drug development. And so I'm hoping to, either start or join a company at the very early stages of their journey. And then thirdly, I think, I've been working with a couple companies, some folks that remind me of me about 5 or 6 years ago. And so, I'm excited to at least spend a little bit of time mentoring some of those companies and working with them to share what I learned, from the CMTRF DTX story. And hopefully, probably not for CMT, but for other diseases with significant unmet need, make an impact, enable them or empower them to make an impact in those conditions.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you for sharing your thoughts with us and being here, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me.
We're very lucky to have a claim on Artie's time, and we're going to use it to the best advantage of the CMT Research Foundation in his drug hunter capacity, as long as we possibly can. He is truly committed to our collective cause. So now I want you to meet Peter deSilva, CMT Research Foundation board member, author, patient, and business executive. Peter's a remarkable person, and I hope you will really find a chance to chat with him today. He joined the CMTRF board in 2021, and he's given a tremendous amount of his time and talent to our CMT community. In addition to chairing our capital campaign to end CMT 1A, he's also recently authored a book called Taking Stock, in which he shares the wisdom and good advice based on his decades of business experience, but with the filter of living with CMT as well. Peter will be happy to sign a book for you later today out in the lobby. And Peter, I just want to say that it's a pleasure to call you a friend and a mentor, and we're very glad you're here.
Great. Thanks, Cleary. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here, right? We're going to get on that boat trip tonight? I don't think so either. Sorry about that, guys. Now, it's really wonderful to be here today. And I must say that what's so exciting for me is that we sit here today on the precipice of all this good news that we're hearing, knowing there's a bunch more work to do, for sure. But imagine 5 years from now. Imagine 10 years from now, 25 years from now, a generation from now, when CMT is gone. Because that's what we're trying to do. Literally, that's what we will do over time. So we sit here today in common cause as we think about how we're going to go after that. There's an old saying that I like a lot, which is, hope is not a strategy. But I've added to that. And actually, I talk about this in my book. But if you have a strategy, that gives one reason for hope. Hope just can't be this endless desire. It has to actually be managed, if you will, in a way that actually has a pretty good chance of success. The CMTRF Foundation sat back a few years ago and said, hope's not good enough. We need a strategy. We need a direction. We're going to need funds. We're going to need the best scientists. We're going to need the best of everything in order to succeed. And again, we sit here today, 5 years later, not with the job complete by any means, but having made tremendous progress along the way. So shortly after I joined the board, Cleary and Pat tapped me on the shoulder and said, how about running a campaign? And I said, oh, really? I've raised a lot of money for a lot of things, but really? And I said, absolutely. Actually, I didn't really hesitate. I said, absolutely. That was 2 years ago. And so we hired a consultant, as we often do around here. And we say, you know what? Can you guys help us think about what a campaign could look like? Can you help us think about the size and the scope and the dimensions? And they came back and said, we think you could probably raise maybe $5 million, maybe 6, maybe 7 on the outside. And I said, tell me why that's going to be so difficult. And they said, well, it's a small community. I said, fair enough. Okay, got it. It doesn't have a national brand. Okay, got it. You don't have a individual who can speak at a national level about it like Michael J. Fox has done in his case. So I said, well, okay, I get it. There's lots of obstacles, but we can mobilize. We can mobilize every individual who's impacted by CMT or has a friend or a family member or an acquaintance who has CMT. And I think we can do $10 million. People looked at me and said, that can't happen. So Susan, my co-chair, wherever she is here, said, no, we're going to go for it. We're going to go for it. We're going to make it 10. Someday we're going to add a 0 on that. But for now, our goal is to get to 10. So it is our second anniversary after launching this campaign. And we're about $6.7 million in to a campaign to raise $10 million, right? Which by happenstance is 2/3 of the way there in a 3-year goal. So we have 3 years. We're 2/3 of the way there, and we're 2 years through. So I think we can do, no, let me rephrase that. We're going to do this. We're going to finish this. And here's our goal. I'm going to state it publicly. At this convention next year, we're going to close this campaign. We are going to find a way to raise the remaining $3.3 million over the next 12 months and close out this campaign right here next year. Okay, that's our goal. Now, just one more thing. When I think about a campaign, I think about it as sort of a very, very linear kind of thing, right? It's like, oh, you have a goal and you meet the goal and you end and you move on to something else. So I started to think about, is that the right way for us to think about fundraising? And candidly, I don't think it is. I think we need to move from this mentality of campaign to campaign to campaign to creating a movement to end CMT, a movement to raise whatever amount of money we ultimately need to end this dreaded disease. And so here are some of the characteristics I'd like us to change over time. If you think about a campaign, it has a defined beginning and a defined end. I just said, when we raise 10 million, we're going to celebrate and we're going to move on. But a movement is perpetual. It goes on and on and on until, and this is the difference. A campaign is about meeting the monetary goal. A movement is about, in our case, eradicating a disease. That's a very different perspective. So we're going to move from this campaign mentality to this movement mentality. When I think about campaigns, they're very important, but they're very tactical. I want to be much more strategic in how we think about our fundraising efforts. When I think about a campaign, they tend to be very curated and planned. A movement is spontaneous. I want spontaneity in how we go after this in the future. And lastly, if you think about a campaign, it has central leadership. I'm the only one standing up here today, right? Susan should be by my side. But if you think about a movement, it's decentralized with hundreds and thousands of leaders. So help us certainly complete this campaign, but also help us move from campaign thinking to creating a movement for CMT. Thank you. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you especially for your leadership. And you always find a way to have a new rallying cry that just ups the ante quite a bit. And I think the notion of a movement to end this disease is very exciting. And the organic nature of what that means is something we'll all have to explore together and execute. Thanks, Peter. So now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Michele and Kent Stahl. They're actually going to be joining us via Zoom call because they're with family out in Colorado. Hi, Kent. Hi, Michele.
Hi. Did you
Nice
unmute
to
it?
have you here.
We're excited to be here.
I'm just going to introduce you for a minute. So Kent and Michele have been incredibly good friends to the CMT Research Foundation for several years now. And the entire Stahl family has been incredibly generous with their time, their diverse talents, and their support. Michele and Kent host fundraisers, offer guidance. Michele sits on the 1A campaign committee, and their children, Hunter and Austin, who lives with CMT 1A, are young professionals at the foundation. So they are all in. They care about the CMT community with their hearts and their actions, and they're using their philanthropy to make a real difference. They're very inspirational in so many ways to us. I know Susan and Michele speak probably weekly, and Kent often has wise business advice for us. So I'm glad they were able to be with us this morning. Welcome.
Thank you. We're happy to be here. Sorry to not be here. We had weddings and we're in Denver, Colorado with lots of events this weekend.
That's great.
Well, thank you for doing this event. I mean, if you think 5 years ago, an event like this was really unheard of and probably would have had 5 people in the room, and to see the hundreds of researchers and hundreds of attendees, I think just really talks to what Peter said about a movement getting started. And it's been wonderful to be part of that process. Our son Austin had a genetic mutation at CMT1A. He just turned 30, so we're also celebrating his birthday out here this week. And I remember when he was a teenager and he was finally diagnosed, and it was frustrating because it took about a decade for us to figure out what he had, and then only to be told there were no available treatment options. So hope isn't a strategy, but no hope's not a good thing either. And that's when we met Susan and Pat. They were really the first 2 people we'd ever met that had CMT other than our son. And we got to see what life might behold for him without finding a cure. And that's where, as a family, we went to a church and we used to have this saying, donate your time, your talents, or your treasures. And so we decided to make this a family event, and we got involved in every dimension, not just donating. So you want to talk about what you and the kids do?
Well, Susan, Cleary, Pat, whenever they say, can you do something for us? We just pretty much say yes. And luckily my kids got involved in this, and it affects all of us. My daughter Hunter started a young professional group, and the young talented MBA students, they have so much to offer, and insights and technology that some of us that were raised without it don't have. And my son is it's great that he's willing to speak about his CMT, because he has spoken to the CMTRF community. He's spoken at Pat's golf fundraiser. We just really want to get this done in any way we can. I know Susan would like to retire, Pat would like to retire, and I'm sure Cleary too. So it would be great to get a cure for this and just shut the place down, as Susan's told me before.
Yeah. And I've tried to, expand on things that I had in the business world to help the community. So I went to Ohio State University and on the board there, and we have a wonderful neurology department. In fact, there have been several approaches that CMTRF has funded at Ohio State. And so with me and others at the university, we're going to host an event in Columbus to spread the awareness of not just the great research that we're doing there, but also CMT. We're going to have an event in our house in Naples this fall. We're bringing an executive chef to have people come in to, again, expand the awareness, expand the pool, get more people involved in this process. We couldn't be more proud of our son. I mean, to wake up someday and find you have this and no fault of your own. And he's done everything in his power to keep himself in good shape and be ready for when we do have available treatment options. So that's why, as a family, we decided to make this kind of our cause. And working with Cleary and Pat and Susan and Peter, it's really just been a wonderful experience. So I hope you can get all of you involved in this, because it really is a movement that you can see is taking traction. And we now have hope between the multiple shots on goal that are now underway. So it makes us very excited, where 15 years ago, we didn't have that.
And, nothing is too little. I'm on a CMT1A committee. You could be on it if you want to. You could have a Christmas party and decide you're going to, your cause is going to be CMT, and you have a birthday party, and please, no gifts, donate to CMT. There's lots of ways you can help, even if you don't have the funds to do it.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you both for being here, for your commitments. Sorry, I've been talking too much for 2 days. But each one of them is so meaningful. And I remember seeing Austin's face last year when he did, for the first time, publicly talk about his CMT and his frustrations with living with it. But as the day wore on, I began to see Austin turn very hopeful and really get excited about being part of this movement. And for that, we're very grateful. And thank you for being here today, and we hope you'll be here in person next year.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes, definitely.
Thanks so much. We'll see you soon. So our scientific advisory board is the backbone of CMT research strategy. They're volunteers, and they focus on the scientific priorities in order to identify the projects that the foundation should fund. I'd like to welcome Dr. Brett McCray and Dr. Bipasha Mukherjee-Clavin to the stage. Brett is a physician scientist specializing in neuromuscular diseases and cellular and molecular neuroscience at the University of Michigan. Formerly, he was at Johns Hopkins. And Bipasha is co-director of the Johns Hopkins CMT Clinic, and she is PI for the Inherited Neuropathies Consortium. Both of them are clinicians, scientists, and members of the CMT Research Foundation Scientific Advisory Board. We are incredibly grateful that you both take time out of your incredibly busy schedules to help us direct our science projects.
Thanks for that introduction, Cleary. So, like she said, I'm Bipasha Mukherjee-Clavin. I'm a physician scientist at Johns Hopkins University, and I'm very focused on CMT research. And so what that means is I see patients with CMT every week in clinic. I also see patients with other peripheral nerve diseases. And then when I'm not in the clinic, I'm in the laboratory, which is actually where I like to spend most of my time. And in the lab, I am focused on using patient stem cells, so stem cells from patients with CMT1A and another related disorder, HNPP, or hereditary neuropathy with liability to pressure palsies, to try and better understand some of the underlying biology of these diseases and to see if we can screen for treatments using these patient-derived stem cells as well.
Morning, everyone. Is this working? It's great to be here. I'm Brett McCray. So like Bipasha, I'm also a physician scientist, neuromuscular neurologist. So in addition to seeing patients with CMT, I also run a basic science lab where I focus on mutations in TRPV4 that cause CMT2C and related disorders. And so we're really interested in the basic mechanisms of that disease and also increasingly looking towards trying to get to clinical trials for those patients.
And Brett and I are also both members of the Scientific Advisory Board, as Cleary has also told you. And so maybe we can tell you a little bit about what the Scientific Advisory Board is. So we're a group of 12 scientists who are all interested in CMT research and committed to CMT research. And we're volunteers, as Cleary said as well. And we gather every month by Zoom because we're all at different universities around the country. And on Zoom, we discuss different research proposals that come into CMTRF for potential funding. And so we discuss, the merits of each of those proposals. We discuss where it can be improved. And then we, decide as a community whether to make a recommendation to fund the proposal or not.
So it's been a real privilege to be on this SAB. Partly because there's just such tremendous expertise and breadth of knowledge on the group. So we have people like Bipasha and me who are clinicians and we understand CMT clinically. We have people who are basic scientists who understand axonal biology and type 2 forms of CMT. We have people who are Schwann cell biologists and understand myelination and myelin development and understand CMT type 1. People who are experts in animal models and really know the nitty-gritty of how these animal models can be used and how therapies can be tested them. And we also have people who are from industry who have experience in identifying therapeutic targets and small molecule drugs and taking those all the way through the process to getting them to clinical trials. So I think I contribute a little bit of expertise, but I really learn a lot from the SAB, and it's been a great experience.
I agree with Brett. It's been a tremendously satisfying experience to be part of the SAB. I'm the newest SAB member, so I've only been part of it for about 3 months now. But I feel like similar to Brett, I contribute a little bit, but I also learn a lot from the whole experience of being part of it. I think one thing that I find particularly gratifying about being on the SAB is there's this very clear mission that we've been given from CMTRF to evaluate each of the proposals that we receive and to think about and to really evaluate them with regards to what they do to drive therapeutics in CMT forward. And so I think that that makes it, that guidance gives us this very sort of clear light by which to evaluate the merits of each proposal and find out where the gaps are to try and make each proposal stronger.
Yeah, one thing I particularly enjoy about the SAB is it brings a really refreshing and positive perspective to reviewing research proposals. So in other situations when reviewers look at grants, we often try to find the weaknesses and really amplify those and use those as kind of a way to not fund a project. In the CMTRF SAB, we do the opposite. We really look for the good in a proposal. And if we see something that's a really good idea, we try to hone in on that and try to build on that. We recognize that every proposal has weaknesses, and we try to then address those weaknesses and help the researchers address those weaknesses as best as we can to build on the good idea. And so sometimes that can be connecting them with other experts who know about certain animal models that they should use, or we get recommendations on how the proposal experiments can be redesigned. And so what we really try to do is bring in people who may not have expertise in CMT, but have good ideas, and we try to get them to a place where those good ideas can actually deliver treatments, which is really the overall goal of this research foundation. So for that reason, it's been a really fun and rewarding experience. Thanks.
So I think you get a little sense of the brain trust that we are fortunate to have at the foundation. We talked about the 20 projects that have been funded thus far, but there were many, 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 many projects evaluated in order to get to the decision on those 20 projects. So we thank you, Brett and Bipasha, and all of the SAB for the hard work that you do. And now I'd like to bring up another friend of ours who really speaks to the importance of driving awareness of this disease. Paralympic medalist Jamal Hill was diagnosed with CMT disease at age 10. He found solace in the pool where the challenges of his condition faded away. But what began as a therapeutic escape evolved into his passion. He was propelled from local swim meets to Paralympic podiums. More than a champion, Jamal's journey exemplifies his resilience and determination. He stands today not just as an athletic icon, but as a beacon of hope, proving that challenges can pave the way to greatness. Jamal has been an advocate for and a voice within the CMT community for years. He uses his platform to inspire others and to share his own CMT story. He's partnered with us, with the CMT Research Foundation, to help raise awareness and help with our mission to deliver treatments for all types. As Jamal said to me this morning, I look forward to amplifying your message and leaving the CMT community stronger than it was when I joined it as a kid. Welcome, Jamal. But can I ask you to stand away from the podium for a minute and model your t-shirt, both front and back?
Big stage, right? Unstoppable. Okay, now you can
Thank you, Jamal.
Fantastic. So if you see a shirt with a similar design pop up on the CMTRF website, I told them this is not trademarked, so go crazy. Really happy to be here. As she said, I'm a professional swimmer at this point in my life. I am neither scientist nor doctor, and immense respect for the scientific community as well as the medical community. Obviously, we're all here because, you know what? If I may, I always write down a really, really rousing and inspiring speech. And then somehow in the last 24 to 48 hours, I see something on TV or on TikTok or on Instagram, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to say that instead. So, that's what's happening right now. But in all seriousness, coming in here today, as one of the patients, right, as someone living with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease 1X, I like to think that I'm the personification of something that a lot of you or your patients or your family members that they experience and they know very well every day. I heard someone say yesterday that facing your fears is actually pretty easy. With enough peer pressure, you can pretty much be talked into doing anything, even if you're afraid of it. And I had to nod my head and say, yeah, you know what, that's true. But one thing that people usually are not able to overcome isn't their fears, it's actually shame, right? So fears is something that we can be pushed to face head on, but no amount of coaxing usually will lead us to open up about things that we are ashamed about. That's something that is just meant for us. And if you're spiritual, maybe God knows too, but if you're like me, I try to keep them out of my business as well. That was really, really interesting, especially as someone living with CMT disease, being diagnosed at 10 years old. When I was diagnosed at 10 years old, it was actually during Thanksgiving dinner, and my arm fell asleep and then my legs fell asleep. And before I knew it, I was actually in this paralyzed state from the neck down. And we went to the hospitals and I was admitted into Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. I'm a Los Angelian. After a few days, they came back and said, hey, you know what, it's Charcot-Marie-Tooth. It runs in your family. And, you know, I kind of went into this, forgive my lack of scientific language here, but I went from this inflamed state, right, to this less inflamed state. And I was this normal 10-year-old kid who could run and jump and swim. I loved swimming at that time. To now, you know, until then, you know, I had 0% nerve capacity from my knees to the soles of my feet and about 20% from my elbows to my fingertips. The doctors told my parents that if I wanted to keep what I had to stop swimming. So that was a bit of a bummer. And then I had to go into, right, rehab and some of these therapies to learn how to walk again, to learn how to hold a pencil, to learn how to open a doorknob, to really just be able to carry my own weight, let alone just do what humans are meant to do, move, right? And it was the most interesting thing because during that whole time, right, especially when I tell this story, and obviously I'm sure a lot of you can relate, I wasn't all that scared. I had my parents there. I had my community, right? And so I felt really, really supported. I felt really, really good about that. So CMT wasn't scary to me in that way. What I dealt with was the shame of having to acknowledge that, hey, I'm dealing with something. And what makes it even more difficult is that if you look at me, you can't see it, right? So when I go out into the world and I'm having trouble standing and walking, and when I go out and I play with my friends and they throw me the ball, and now Jamal's nicknamed Butterfingers, you know, I can't sit there and say, hey, it's because of this, because from that perspective of shame, if you can't see it, why would you believe it, right? If you can't be the one to identify it, then now I feel like I'm making excuses for who I am and for what's afflicting to me. And that was really a prison for a long time. And just being a part of this CMT community, I know that that is not a rare story, right? It's something that a lot of us can relate to. And that was actually something that I hid for 12 years. So I was diagnosed at 10 years old, and I didn't come out of the proverbial closet until I was 22 years old. And, you know, that was, you know, guy friends, girlfriends, cousins, this, that, and the other, unless you were my parents or my doctor or my uncle who also had CMT, you didn't know. And I liked it that way. I didn't want anyone to know because I didn't want anything to be wrong with me. The only thing that brought me into the light, really, in that light, is just self-acceptance, allowed me to release that shame, was a dream. It was the dream that I'd had since I was a child to become a professional swimmer. And so, like I said, I have a large respect for the scientific and medical community. When I was in college, I was a physics major, though I did a lot more swimming than studying, 100%. And so as a junior, I ended up leaving to pursue this dream of being a swimmer. At that time, I was still in the closet though, right? I still never spoke about my disease. I never spoke about how hard it was, again, just to get out of bed in the morning, let alone swim fast, which I'm a fast swimmer, don't challenge me. But I wanted to go on and be an Olympic swimmer, right? Because there's nothing wrong with Jamal Hill. I'm a great guy. You look at me like, dude, what are you talking about? And that was my dream, and I was chasing. I gave it everything I had, and after a couple years, I had a swim coach, and this was the first person in a dozen years to pull me aside and say, "Hey, Jamal, I look at the way that you dive in the water. You got skills, but I wouldn't really call it a dive. You're kind of flopping in a little bit, right? You don't really got much jump out of those legs. I look at the way that you get out of the car, right? How you pick one leg up and put it on the ground, and you're like always tapping things to make sure it's there before you put your weight on it. You remind me of," and she had some background. She's like, "You remind me of a cerebral palsy patient that I had once upon a time." And I had a smile just like this when she said that, because this was the first time in a dozen years that I felt seen, right? Like what I felt like had brought me so much shame, right? That I had to hide it and I had to conceal it and disguise it. And I didn't want to tell anyone about it because I didn't want to not be believed. Someone had now identified. I'm like, oh, wow. Well, it's funny you should say that. I actually have this neuropathy. And we went into this whole thing. And then the next thing she said is, well, if we're not able to cure this disease, which, we will, but at that time we weren't, maybe instead of an Olympic journey, you should look at the Paralympics. Maybe that's the route you should go. And I shut it down right there. At that point, I felt so, can I say disrespected? I felt so disrespected. It actually really, really upset me, right? It went from this real glee of like, wow, I finally been seen, to like, oh, whoa. I know you can see me, but we don't need to run and shout it from the rooftops here, lady. Like, let's calm down a bit. And that was a really, really, really pivotal point in my life of acceptance. And obviously I'm standing here today as a Paralympic medalist, so I was able to embrace that journey and move along with it. But in order to get over that hurdle, in order to release that shame, there was really one big thing, and I've already said it. It was that community. It was a matter of me going to the people that I loved and that I felt cared about me the most, and letting them know, hey, I gotta tell you guys, dude, I feel bad. I don't want to be on stage. I don't want people looking at me trying to figure out, is there really anything wrong with this guy? I don't want to be even considered that I'm faking it. I don't want to be seen as less than. I don't want to be, when we all know it's a more woke world than ever. But living with I'm not the most PC, so I don't know if people say disability anymore still, even as a Paralympian, so forgive me. But like living with a disability, living with a challenge, whether that be a physical, emotional, mental impediment, I don't want to be that, right? I just want to live my life. I just want to keep it going. I just want, right? That's what we all want. We all still have that inner child that just wants to blend in, right? Even when you're an adult and the farther away from the crowd, probably the more successful, we still all have that innate need to just be accepted. And coming to my family and sharing this with them and really opening up to them first and realizing, wow, hey, you know what? I can't control anyone else, but these people who have raised me, these people who are here with me, who go to these swim meets all over the country, who believe in this crazy guy who's trying to be a pro swimmer and all these things, they love me and they still see me as a bit of a superhero. That was enough for me to release that shame and really lean into my story. And that's when my mindset really started to become about being unstoppable, right? And having this belief that, you know what, no matter what it is, CMT won't stop me. And guess what? It's not going to stop you. It's not going to stop your patients. And the cure is coming, but guess what? Until it gets here, you're still unstoppable. And I wanted to bring a little bit of entertainment for you guys today. Obviously, if you live with CMT, you know what it's like. You know what the emptiness is like. You know what pins and needles can feel like, which is crazy, right? Again, I don't fully get all of it, but the human body is a wild place. And I want to share a video with you. And the reason I wanted to share this particular video is because I think it really sums up a bit of everything that I just spoke about. Now, it's not a Paralympic swimming video. You can find that on YouTube. But this is a swimming video. I've always been of service, and before I was a pro swimmer, I was a lifeguard for many years. And some years ago, before I really made it to this stage of professional swimming, I wanted to be an ocean lifeguard. And like I said, I live on the West Coast. Pacific Ocean is very cold, pretty much year round. I don't know if you've ever been there, but trust me, it's a very pretty place. The water's always cold, and we know what temperatures do to neuropathy, right? Like cold temperatures and CMT, they don't get along. But I had this dream. I wanted to be this lifeguard. And you know what, if we can run the clip, I'll say a few words after it, but I think it really speaks for itself. And so the reason I wanted to play that for you is because obviously we're coming out of the Pacific Ocean. Listen, the water was, I guess, not literally freezing, but it was 60 degrees Fahrenheit. If you know anything about water, that's very cold. And everyone else, as you can see, is coming out. They're running up the beach. My legs are completely numb. I can't feel them anyway, but now they're beyond numb. Very sharp pains running through them. And the only thing I kept thinking coming out of that water was, CMT won't stop me. That's it. Like, I've already swam all this way. I'm so close to the finish line. The only thing I have to do at this point is keep these feet that I can't feel underneath me. I refuse to fall down. I don't care how long it takes, how wild I look trying to find my which ways and whereabouts. CMT won't stop me. And I'm going to cross that line, and it's going to be on these legs. So listen, that's the message I wanted to come and share with you all today, a message of hope, a message of inspiration. And I'm really looking forward to continuing to participate in future CMT events with the CMT Research Foundation. I'll be around today, so I'm happy to connect with you. And in case we don't see each other today, you can connect with me. I'm sure you can guess it at cmtwon'tstopme.com. Thank you.
Clearly, CMT is not stopping him, and it's not going to stop us from finding that cure. Thank you, Jamal. That was amazing. And your story was very moving, but as you said, it's not the first time that we've heard stories like that from people. So we are very grateful when people come out of that closet and are willing to talk about living with CMT, because that helps spread the word. That helps other people say, wow, you know, we've got to do something about this. So thank you very much. So now, here to comment on the importance of patient advocacy groups to the biotech industry is our friend, Dr. Rachel Salzman, who is Global Head of Corporate Strategy at Armatus Bio. Come on up, Rachel. Earlier in her career, Dr. Salzman co-founded the Stop ALD Foundation, a patient-led organization focused on the development of drugs for ALD, a disease that affected members of her family. So she knows exactly what it looks like from our side. Her foundation successfully developed a drug using new technology and gene therapies. She also co-founded Swan Bio, a gene therapy company that raised over $70 million. Rachel has also been a senior executive at Alcyone Therapeutics and founded Ultra Squared Bio, a not-for-profit dedicated to bringing gene therapies to ultra-rare populations. Welcome, Rachel. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. So Cleary, thank you for that really nice introduction, and you just saved me a minute of my talk. So that was great, and I'm really grateful to be here. But I do want to go back to before where Cleary started. I am actually, just to talk a minute about myself, I am actually one of, I think, a small group of people who knew exactly what I wanted to do from when I was 7 years old and stuck with it. I always knew I wanted to be a veterinarian. I always wanted to be a horse doctor. And I worked very hard, and that's what I was. I was practicing medicine, doing exactly what I wanted to for a number of years. And I know some people have plans, some people don't have plans, but it always ends up never what you think it's going to be. So a few years into practice, I come from a close family. A member of my family, my nephew, was diagnosed with what ended up being a fatal monogenic inherited neurological disease, adrenoleukodystrophy. And that's what Cleary was referring to. And that, as you all know, with genetic diseases, especially ones that are neurological, especially ones that impact children, they pretty much create an implosion within your family, because very quickly we did genetic testing, and I had other young nephews who were also affected, and other members who were carriers that were going to be affected with neuropathies. We very quickly started a family foundation, and then we're able to accomplish some of this drug development that ended up being successful, but taking too long. But everything takes too long, no matter how long it takes. While I was at Swan Bio, the company that I co-founded to address the adult form of ALD, which my mother has, because of a neuropathy, she fell, and of course, complications from falls. So from a very personal level, I appreciate what that means to the person falling and for the family around them. We were working on our lead indication, but CMT1A caught my eye. This is over 4 years ago. And when I started to reach out to the scientists who were working on it, they said, it's not available. Another company has it. They did not disclose that information. And I would call every once in a while and say, if they're not going to take it, we want it. This is something that CMT1A just really spoke to me for many of the reasons that we've been already alluding to here and that we discussed in depth yesterday. So lo and behold, about 6 months ago, I start working with Armatus, and their lead program is CMT1A. So I called some of the investigators who I'd been in contact with for years and said, oh, finally, we found ourselves, we're back together again. So unlike some of the other stories, this was something that I was always very interested in and felt connected to for many years. And I feel like I'm coming back home, even though I don't know probably most of you personally. I'm sure very soon I will. So I'm just so pleased to be here on that very human, personal level. This means a lot to me. At Armatus, besides the fact that CMT1A is our lead program, we discover and develop programs that are about vectorizing RNAi. And what that means is we're delivering means of genetically silencing genes that are toxic if you have too much of them. So in that case, as you all know, with CMT1A, there's too much PMP22. So we're using an AAV vector in order to deliver, it happens to be a microRNA that decreases that protein away from toxic levels to healthy levels. I think it's important to point out that our scientific and technology partners are the ones who I'd had my eye on from years ago. It's not even arguable that they are the most talented and the best in the business. And I'm referring to the Scott Harper Lab at Nationwide Children's. He texted me this morning. He wanted to be here, but he's on the FSHD walk and roll. That is another disease that can be benefited from silencing a gene that is toxic when there's too much of it. So he sends his regards to everybody. And then the other group that we're partnered with is the Cleopa Lab out of Singh in Cyprus, and Dr. Cleopa is here, and I'm sure many of you know, if not him personally, of his reputation. So the company has been fortunate to partner on a technological and scientific level with the best. And I think that's very consistent with the strategy that CMTRF has. So it's probably not a coincidence that some of the funding we got from CMTRF has allowed us in a critical path manner. The critical path is what gets you from here to there, and you don't want anything to get in the way of critical path because, you know, especially in neurology, you know, weeks, months, sometimes even days matter. So the whole goal is to get into the clinic and get into patients as soon as possible. So CMTRF has been very instrumental in funding some of that science that has allowed us to move forward in critical path. In terms of the program in CMT1A, we are still in the animal phase. And I know you've been hearing a lot about drug development. Probably a lot of you know more than you want to know about drug development at this point. But of course, you go from usually you go from an idea to cells to animals to people, more or less. And we're at that animal stage. And because of that work coming out of the Harper and the Cleopa lab, we have remarkable proof of concept data where we're able to show that the mice with CMT1A are able to function better. I don't know that they're feeling better, but I'm going to assume that they are. I mean, as a veterinarian, I guess I can make that assumption. And also able to show that we're able to decrease those otherwise toxic levels of PMP22 and do this in a safe manner. So we feel very comfortable about this very robust data package. I will be talking a little bit more about it in another panel after lunch today. So I'm sure, well, I hope many of you will be at that session as well. And once you develop those very important data sets about being able to help engage the target and get a proof of concept around impacting the disease in a meaningful way in an animal model and doing it in a safe manner, the next step is to engage with FDA with the idea of bringing this therapy to patients, obviously within the form of a clinical trial, as quickly as possible. I think the main point I want to get across is I understand the importance of urgency and of innovation. And it turns out there's actually data that shows that the combination of urgency, which can only come from people who are living it and wake up every day. I know why I wake up every day. I do. It's not to go treat horses anymore. It's for this. Completely changed. And I'm really happy about that. When you combine that urgency with innovation, you get to your answers faster. It's just, there's data, and I can talk about it one-on-one if anybody wants to have that chat. So that's why I'm so pleased to be here, where we have that perfect combination that's going to get us where we need to go, basically as fast as we can and in a high quality, very robust, responsible fashion. So again, I'm really grateful to be here, and I look forward to participating further, and please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Dr. Salzman's sense of urgency is just music to my ears and to all of yours, I know. And we're very lucky to have her and the team at Armatus on our side. Now I'd like to bring up Tara Haik, CMT Research Foundation Ambassador. Welcome, Tara. In the past 18 months, all of three of Tara's boys have been diagnosed with CMT2N. And so has Tara and her mom, who is here today. And one of the boys is here too. I think Luca's here. Welcome, Luca. It's hard to hear about the challenges that Tara faces every day and not want to be part of the solution for her and for her boys. In spite of her heavy personal load, Tara has carved out time to be part of the Foundation's ambassador program by sharing her story and helping raise funds to pay for the research that one day we believe will cure Luca, Liam, and Lane. So welcome, Tara.
Thank you. So good morning, CMT Global Research Conference. I'm a 33-year-old mother of 3 boys. We live in Slidell, Louisiana, just outside of New Orleans. I'm a single mom. I told myself I wouldn't cry.
It's okay. Take a breath.
Remember that when you hear what my days are like in a moment or two.
Maybe, please. Okay, and then when you feel better, you jump in, all right? All right. All three of my boys, Luca, who's 6, Liam, who's 3, and Lane, who's 2, have been diagnosed with CMT type 2N. So have I, so has my mother. In 2022, Luca would come home from school complaining of pain in his legs and feet, which he described as a buzzing sensation. Luca started waking up in the middle of the night with awful body aches. Looking more closely, I started to notice changes in the bones and blistering on his feet, and I noticed he wasn't walking normally. Our pediatrician examined Luca's feet and mentioned the possibility of something called Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. The name absolutely threw me for a spin. How funny does that sound, I thought. Anytime you want to come back. All right?
Sure, thanks. Eventually, the chief of orthopedic surgery at Children's Hospital of New Orleans examined Luca, took x-rays, and agreed that it might be CMT. He referred us to a neurologist, and the anxious wait to see him felt like a lifetime, especially since I went to Dr. Google for some mommy research on CMT. 1 month later, we were finally seen by a team of muscular dystrophy doctors who evaluated Luca, reviewed our family history, and ordered genetic testing. 6 weeks later, I received a phone call with Luca's diagnosis of CMT2N. I was given very few details, so still had so many questions that were unanswered. A few months later, I was tested along with my mother. I tested positive, but without symptoms. My mother tested positive. It turns out what we thought for years was progressive arthritis for her was in fact CMT. We then tested my 2 younger boys because they were exhibiting early signs of CMT, and that definitive diagnosis came roughly 2 months later. Our world changed drastically. We had to adjust to our new reality, which included a variety of financial concerns, as I had to take time off of work to attend medical and rehab appointments, custom molded shoe insert appointments, bracing appointments, and custom wheelchair and stroller appointments. Between my 3 boys, we attend 6 physical therapy appointments a week. Thank goodness I have the help of my mother and father and the support of my maternal family, or I could not have made it this far on my own. As you can imagine, like all CMT patients and parents, I dove deep into the world of CMT. I started looking online for resources and information on the disease. I reached out to several CMT organizations and finally found Chelsea Layton in the Charcot-Marie-Tooth Research Foundation. I had an opportunity to share my story with Chelsea and become a part of a great team of CMT ambassadors. We work individually and as a team to raise awareness of CMT and stage fundraisers for the crucial research that they do that will one day help cure Luca, Liam, and Lane. It is families with CMT and their immediate friends and relatives who provide most of the funding. I hope you will join us in this important effort. We must come together and fight to find a cure for CMT. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm gonna get that. Thank you, Tara. There are so many themes here, and we are so grateful that you are part of our community and that we can support you and you are supporting us. And we hope that we can get you that cure very, very quickly. The community theme came up in Jamal's conversations. It feels like it comes up every day in conversations with patients and with people at the foundation. So we'll just keep at it. So now I'd like to bring up, I think we're probably way over time. Is that right, Eric? Okay. I hope you don't mind. I'd like to introduce Dr. Paul August, scientist, drug developer, biotech executive, and member of CMT Research Foundation Scientific Advisory Board and our board of directors. Paul was part of the CMT Research Foundation before we even started. His expertise at Revere Therapeutics is neuroscience and oncology. And before that, he spent nearly 2 decades at Sanofi, where he pioneered innovative rare disease research programs. And that, I think, is where you met Pat Livney. But I'm sure he'll tell you the story. He's co-founder of Acuristem, a leader in the development of therapeutics for neurodegenerative diseases. Paul's dedication to the CMT Research Foundation and its mission is unrelenting. He always has time for questions. He's always offering scientific leadership and wise counsel on all fronts. I'm very proud that he's part of our organization, and I'm also proud to call him a friend. Come on up.
Thank you, everybody. It's really a pleasure and honor to be here. And, I think with Tara's story, that's why we're all here. That's why we've invested many hours of our own personal time, and really have sort of focused on things to develop therapeutics for patients like Tara and her boys. And, and it's an honor for me to be here at the CMTRF. First of all, I want to say it's really fantastic to be back here in New England. I grew up in New Hampshire, and so it's really nice to be back in Boston for the fall. I'm looking to leave before the snow comes, so back to Arizona. My background's really been in molecular genetics and chemistry, and sort of pulling those together. I've really been on a mission of focusing on understanding disease mechanisms, working on identifying targets, molecular targets, to understand how we can sort of address those diseases. And then once we do that, identify therapeutics. And the opportunity to really apply that to the CMT community certainly exists. A huge unmet need with this disease. So as you heard from Cleary, my career has been at a number of different companies: Sanofi, Icogen, Curistem, a company I co-founded that actually has done some work on CMT, Agios and Revere Therapeutics. But throughout my career, my scientific career, at all these companies, I've championed CMT research. And, why did I do that? I had some interest in CMT initially, but I can tell you the reason why I've been working on CMT is really because of one person, and that's Pat Livney. And so Pat really kind of brought me into the fold very early on to work on CMT. He's been a mentor, a friend, and a colleague. I've not necessarily been a good golf partner to him, but he puts up with me. In 2014, I started a discussion with Pat and then later Susan, who I met, and it's been a pleasure sort of knowing Susan for the past 10 years. And we talked a lot about CMTA, about the CMT and the opportunities to sort of work on discovering therapeutics for CMT1A. And so we did that. We initiated a project while I was at Sanofi. And that progressed, and I went on to another company, and subsequently Pat engaged me in, I think it was around 2017, and he talked to me about a new idea he had, and he said, do you think this is really, viable? Could we have a foundation that's just solely focused on developing therapeutics for patients with CMT? I really want to have this sort of focus. I said, absolutely, Pat, that's exactly what I think we need to do. We really need to have a laser-like focus, on this area. And so working with, sort of Pat and then, Susan and, we started organizing and they brought together and they built the foundation, and we had our, sort of small team of the board then in terms of building the organization with that laser-like focus on developing therapeutics. And, at that time, we were nascent, and starting a nonprofit is not easy. There's no grant mechanisms to start your nonprofit. There's no venture capitalists who are sitting on the sidelines waiting to invest in the nonprofit. And so you have a challenge to sort of build this organization. And I'm super proud of where we are today. Just look at, this, what we've accomplished, where we are. It's fantastic that we have this sort of unifying mission. And in the early days, the vision that we had, in terms of pulling forward and building this organization was to, sort of frame the entire foundation built on science, right? And so the science being, we need the best science, we need the best approaches to develop therapeutics to really overcome, some of the challenges in CMT. And in some CMTs, we didn't even know what the target was, the drug target is, and that's still a problem today. But the organization really kind of looked at that and said, well, what do we need to do? How are we going to solve this problem? First, what we need to do is identify what are the barriers? What are the barriers that are preventing us from developing therapeutics that are really going to sort of treat this disease? And so we did that. And we had an SAB meeting in Orlando, Florida, with Charlotte Sumner and Gabsang Lee and Susan and Pat and many others to really kind of talk through what the barriers were. We identified some of those barriers. And then we decided to execute on overcoming those barriers and really identifying approaches that, sort of could, address the underlying disease. And I think you saw from both Artie and what Susan and Pat talked about, DTX Pharma is actually one of those things that came out of that. So it all initiated with the CMTRF and sort of the vision and the unifying theme and the push towards therapeutics. So I've worked with the organization now, I guess, through two CEOs, Susan Ruediger, who's the CEO before Cleary, who is now doing an excellent job pulling us all together and driving us forward, and three CSOs. We have Edrit Havalosa now, and before Keith Fargo and Grace Pavlak. And we have a very strong scientific legacy with all of those individuals sort of helping to drive that unifying story, unifying vision together. And we're grateful to have such scientific minds, invested in the organization and helping us move, these types of therapeutics forward. You heard the story about DTX in 2019. But what you didn't hear was all the other companies that we met with. We meet with lots of companies. Not all of them turn into a DTX, but we try. We try our best to actually make those happen. And we're really driven to identify new approaches and committed to the search to identify new drug targets, new modalities, such as gene therapy, small molecules, siRNAs, vectorized siRNA, all sorts of approaches, all in the effort to develop new approaches that we can fund for you, for therapies, for you and your families. And that's what we're trying to do here at the foundation. It's an enormous lift, and it's also very costly to really advance all these efforts, but this is what we do. We build the organization, we define the framework of our mission, and then we tactically identify how we're going to drive it forward. We're investing in companies like Armatus Bios, Shift Pharmaceuticals, Nanite, Augustine Therapeutics, Horizon, and others. And we've had some big successes. And I'm proud of my success, to work with Susan to help bring DTX to the table to get us to this point where we're going to have a therapeutic that's moving forward in the portfolio of Novartis. But we also have 19 other funded projects, 5 clinical candidates. So I hope that you see and that you hear today, you see that we're opening doors and we're creating real momentum in CMT research. So thank you all for your efforts and your support and the CMTRF organization.
Thank you, Paul, for everything that you do. And now we're very happy to have a new guest, Brian King Joseph, an exceptional violinist, renowned for his musical talents. Brian was a finalist, and I think some of you recognized him last night. He was a finalist on the hit TV show America's Got Talent in 2018. Brian's mastery of the violin, combined with his energy and his amazing stage presence and his personality, has earned him widespread acclaim. What sets Brian apart is his determination in the face of adversity. He battles neuropathy, but he defies the odds and continues to excel. Imagine playing the violin like this with neuropathy. And he inspires others with his resilience and artistry. With his unique fusion of musical genre, Brian King Joseph has solidified his position as a true innovator and a captivating force in the world of violin performance. And he has promised to help spread the word about the CMT Research Foundation and all of the work that we're doing. So thank you, Brian. Come on up. I wish you could perform, but we'll show a little video.
It was so good, so dramatic, so powerful.
Case of peripheral neuropathy. It's already to the point where I can't feel my hands and I've lost motor function.
And the fact that you are a violin player makes it even harder.
I just want to show people that it doesn't matter what obstacles you might have, you can do whatever it is that makes you happy.
You are 100% the best violinist performer of all time, I think.
I'm supposed to, wow, this is very loud. Hi, everybody. I'm supposed to let this play for the next 30 seconds so you guys can see all of the great things that I did on that show. But I figured I would just tell you here, because it's not really about that show. What I'm here to talk to you about is what it took to get to this place here now, the unseen struggles that I had to go through. It truly is an honor to stand here before all of you on my own 2 feet. 10 years ago, in this same exact city, as I laid in a hospital bed across the river, a team of 8 neurologists at Beth Israel told me to get ready for a wheelchair, for I had less than 4 years to walk. My nerves had degenerated to the point of no return. My story before all of this began in Washington, D.C. An underprivileged neighborhood, a chronically sick child, a hardworking mother, and an abusive father who couldn't be bothered to deal with the myriad of health problems that came with me. Very early for me, his love turned into hate, to let me know that I was worthless every day and would never amount to anything simply because of the problems that I had to deal with, that I didn't choose, but were thrust upon me. I knew that music could be my escape from this terrible situation I was in. So I took to street performing. I found out what really mattered to me about making music when I did that. It wasn't what it sounded like or how I felt when I was doing it. It was how it affected other people. This is when I found my true purpose in life. After that, I knew I had to reach as many people as possible so that I could save as many people as possible. So I didn't give up. That escape came for me in the form of a full presidential scholarship to Berklee College of Music. Here, I got only 4 months, a small taste of my dream, the classic story, the child from the underprivileged neighborhood who made it to a place where he could make something of himself in the world. All of a sudden, it felt like it was snatched away from me. A new pain emerged. Uncontrollable spasms, unrelenting pain, left me bedridden, unable to walk, unable to attend any more of my classes, and most importantly, unable to touch my fingers to the strings of the violin, which now felt like knives every time. I put it down and I sat as I waited for doctors to tell me what I should do. In that hospital, after years, almost a year of false fake diagnoses that unfortunately left me in a place wondering, what would I do? When I got those words said to me in front of me by that doctor saying, you have 4 years, the face that he had was so grim. He expected me to go home, curl up, and wait for it. This was the second moment where I realized I had an even greater purpose. To show everybody that no one and nothing can stop you from going where you want to go, for doing what you do, and most importantly, for helping other people once you've gotten there. Because you see, I knew something the doctor didn't. he forgot one important thing in his diagnosis: hope. We hear the word a lot, especially in this space, but I'd like to share with you the story of the origin of hope. The story is an old Greek legend by the name of Pandora's box. Some of you have heard it, some of you haven't. I'll give you the short version. The gods were mad at the humans. Zeus was mad that humankind had the gall to get fire for themselves. In an act to punish all of us, he made a woman named Pandora, gave her a box filled with all the terrible things in life: sickness, pain, sadness, old age, death. This and many other things were put in that box. At the bottom of that box, Zeus put one more thing, meant to be the final stab, the final joke: hope. Well, why? It would ensure that all of these terrible things that were thrust upon humankind would be endured, that they would falsely cling to some notion of being able to overcome. Just like my doctor 10 years ago, Zeus was wrong as well, because hope led to endurance of the human spirit. And that endurance led to triumph, time and time and time again. Plagues came and went, we remained. Wars came and went, we remained. Sickness will come and it will go, and we will remain. And through it all, maybe those gods may or may have never even existed, but hope remains. And so I challenge everybody here today to embrace the loss, to embrace these terrible things that happen to us only for the reason that if we apply this same human spirit, this hope, this endurance, it will lead to triumph. And whatever anyone's journey in here is, we all have unique destinations, unique journeys on how to get there. Just remember to always carry that hope with you, for it's not just hope. It is the start of triumph. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. That was wonderful. Great of you to be here with us today. Thank you. And finally, to close this session, I'd like to ask Dr. Edwards-Havalosa to come up and share some of the highlights from yesterday's Researcher Day. I think most of you know that Dr. Havalosa is the Research Foundation's Chief Scientific Officer. Edwards came to us from the Muscular Dystrophy Association, where she was Research Portfolio Director for numerous diseases, including CMT. She has her PhD in neuroscience from Stanford and her undergrad degrees in molecular and cell biology. Welcome, Edwards.
Thanks, Cleary. I sometimes wonder if it's the best to be last when you have so many incredible speakers going ahead before, like going and speaking before you. So I'm just going to try. And I was told we're running really behind. So this is going to be a very quick highlight of yesterday's talks. So, as many of you might have joined us yesterday, there was a very packed agenda. But I think we really, captured what were some of the important topics that were needed to be discussed in order to keep going with the drug development process. And actually, Dr. Paul August highlighted this, where we really need to understand the different disease mechanisms so that we're able to develop and efficiently develop the types of drugs and therapies that are needed for CMT. So just alluding to that, we had talks that talked about presentations in terms of the commonalities, and there has been shown in terms of the neuroinflammation and the stress response that can be targeted and modulated. We also heard about the role of mitochondria and how this is implicated in axonal health. So really understanding and discovering what these different mechanisms do in the development of the disease, it will help us find treatments more efficiently that work for many types of CMT. Then we had presentations. So once we know the modalities, the common mechanisms of the disease, then we need to understand how does this work in a model. So we currently have different model systems to study the disease and to be able to identify the appropriate model systems to better understand what is happening. And then before we proceed that to human clinical trials, we need to understand whether these drugs and therapies are efficient, are they safe? So this is why we have people working on mouse models, human immunopluripotent stem cells, and now we have some new models as well where we're developing chips to model the cell system, but now you have a engineered chip for looking at those different signals. Then we had a conversation about gene therapy and the landscape of that. Dr. Afrouz Rashnanajad talked about the exploration of using viral and non-viral vector for delivery. And then, also talking about the challenges. How do we deliver those drugs? Because we have the blood-nerve barrier, and this is really sort of acts as the guards or walls of protecting your nerves from going inside your cells. And then also preclinical considerations. What would be the best delivery route? What are the doses? And what are some of those outcome measures? And also the importance of, thinking about their toxicity involved and implicated here. And then there's also the challenges of gene therapy as well. And then after the gene therapy considerations, we also talked about the clinical trials in CMT, because CMT is so heterogeneous that we now know over 100 genes are implicated and known. So this also creates some challenges in clinical trials. There's a need for more sensitive, reproducible, and clinically relevant outcome measures. There's also need for biomarkers that will help us better understand if the treatment is working. And then all of these different considerations as we think about drug therapy and really finding cures and treatments for CMT. I just want to bring it back to our keynote speaker who talked about, there is so much momentum in CMT, and then really the importance of collaboration and what were the key to successes of drug development. So one of the highlights, is really to understand how the disease affects the normal functioning of the human body. Then we need to have well-validated therapeutic target. Then we have the design and execution of informative clinical trials. And all of these different areas involve so many people, different stakeholders coming together. This could be academic, industry, regulators. And then yesterday too, we had different panels, and in terms of if you have a finding from an academic setting, how do we push that to the next stage in industry, and then getting more funding so that we can further develop these types of therapies and drugs. And overall, when you think about all of these different important points, and in the middle, one of the key driving factor to the success is really the patient's involvement and also the nonprofit foundations. So as we think about how do we move the field forward, we would love to hear from you, especially the patients in the room. What is important to you? How can we help you, and how can we work together?